name's Scott O'Neill. I'm a Professor and Dean of Science at Monash University in Australia. So it's an inherited intracellular bacteria that lives in insects, and we think that maybe 60% of all insects might carry it, and so that could be more than 4 million species naturally infected. So while Wolbachia is very widespread in insects, it's not very widespread in vectors of disease. And so we got interested in it from the point of view of its ability to spread into other insect species, and we wanted to see if we could harness some of the properties of known Wolbachia to shorten lifespan and utilise the ability of Wolbachia to spread into insect populations as a way of manipulating vectors. The cool thing was that when we were doing that work, we found out really unexpectedly that when you put Wolbachia into the mosquito, it blocked the ability of viruses to grow in the mosquito. And so if they can't grow, they can't be transmitted. And so at that point, we thought this could be very significant. And so almost 9 years ago now. And so since that time, we've been working solidly, a big team of people, to see whether we could take this idea from the bench out into the field. Lots of different things. So, initially we had to get regulatory approval to release a biological agent into the field. We had to do a lot of community engagement. Imagine a situation where we have to release mosquitoes to get Wolbachia to seed the population of wild mosquitoes. And the mosquitoes that we release will bite people. So imagine if they're biting you. Better yet, imagine you had a 6-month-old baby or you had a very elderly parent. So we're asking a lot of the community. So we spent a lot of time working with communities to get their support. When we first did our community engagement, we just about had dinner with everybody in the small town we worked with one-on-one to talk and listen to their concerns. And you go into a city of 10 million people and you can't do that anymore. And so we've been looking at community engagement methods that will scale to those sort of settings. And that's what we've been doing in some of our bigger deployments in Townsville, working out community engagement methods that will scale and running them now in Indonesia and different places. Having really authentic conversations that helped us build trust. And these conversations were two-way, not one-way. It wasn't health education we were doing. It was actually listening to what was on people's mind and wanting to have an authentic dialogue with them, revealing what we didn't know, what we did know, what our hopes were. You talk to a community, it doesn't matter whether it's a poor fishing village in Vietnam or it's a sophisticated population in Rio de Janeiro. Two main things come back. Is it safe for me as a person? If these mosquitoes bite me, what is the risk to me or my 6-month-old baby? And the second is, what is the impact on some concept of the balance of nature? So could there be unintended environmental consequences? And it's interesting, we get those two questions every time from every community we talk to. We don't want to rely on our own view of that. We show the evidence that other people that are independent to us have looked at these questions. We have very large risk assessments that have been done that answer those sort of questions as well as many other potential hazards. And we like to point to that rather than us pushing our own wagon, if you like, because we're a bit anchored to the technology. So we prefer to have an independent and external view on that. And all of the external risk assessment says negligible impact. The biggest risk that's come out of those risk analysis is a premature view that the problem has been fixed. Existing control measures might start to get wound back prematurely. So we did our first releases in North Queensland. We didn't feel like this is something we should foist on to some community in a developing country without foisting it on our own communities first thing. We have dengue. And so we put, and have a rich tradition in Australia of biological control and releasing things into the environment and all the things that can go wrong with that, so we're quite sensitised to it. And so our initial work in North Queensland was working out how to do it, how to release these mosquitoes and get Wolbachia to establish. And so the first few years was all about that. And when that worked, we had all this indirect evidence that it was having an impact on dengue in Australia, but we needed the direct efficacy data. And so that's what we're doing now in places where dengue is, much more of a disease issue. Indonesia and Vietnam is running big efficacy studies now. Not yet. It's going to be painstaking waiting for these studies to run. It's probably going to take, a good 2 to 3 years before we have that data. And, we're feeling, and WHO through its VCAG advisory group has been suggesting that we should, while those are coming through, the indirect evidence is sufficient that we should be looking at pilot deployments. And so we're setting up sites at the moment for pilot deployments of potentially 2 to 3 million people while the efficacy data is coming in. And so we should get signal out of those deployments as well. From my perspective, one of the key points is that it's a sustainable method. A lot of vector control methods you have to apply every year. They're very expensive. Most countries can't afford them, don't do them, do nothing. People get really sick. What we like about this, and what I think is very powerful about it, is it's front-loaded cost-wise. So, you put these mosquitoes out over maybe a 10 to 20 week period through releases into the community, and then it maintains itself. And so far our data are up to 5 years and no sign that should stop. And so that's a really key feature, I think, of a public health program. The other thing is we've found incredible community support for what we do. If you spend a little bit of time doing some background media checking on our program, it's hard to find negative media around us. And I think that's been about this authentic relationship that we've been developing where we are. So what else could I say? The other thing I think about this is that the impact is going to be really big. So that's, maybe a bold thing for me to say, and I'm probably quite anchored because of my position into the program, but I'm happy to bet expensive bottles of French wine that we're going to see impact. It's just going to be what is going to be the scale of that impact, which is what we'll find out in the next 2 years. And I think has been really fundamental to our success is that we work in a not-for-profit framework. So we're not a commercial company like many other people developing interventions are. Will happily die poor. And I think that's been a really important part of what we're doing because it helps with trust with communities, and fundamentally with a new technology, that trust is really important. And so when communities understand we're not trying to make money off them, their attitude to us changes completely. The other thing is that we're really pushing hard to try and get the intervention down to less than $1 per person, $1 a day, $1 per person, US dollar per person. And I think if we can hit that magical number, then I think, and we get the efficacy data we're expecting, I think we should see very strong uptake.